Hey guys, Prowl 1701 here, and today on It's Armageddon, we're going to be talking about what if you could only save 3 stories from each Doctor. Like somehow Armageddon's happening, end of the world, everything's getting destroyed. Somehow you've only got time to grab the essentials: food, water, some Doctor Who stories. But for some reason, you can only grab 3 from each Doctor. So today we're going to look at the first, second, and third Doctors. What 3 stories would you pick if you could only save 3 Doctor Who stories, the video and the audio, from annihilation? And I limited it to 3 to make it tricky. I thought about doing 5, but that felt like I was being too generous. So we're going to really make this hard and just do 3. Now with the first Doctor, the biggest thing I had to decide was, do I pick an unearthly child? Because while that first episode is so amazing and one of the most iconic episodes the show's ever had, the other 3, while I enjoy them more than most, still aren't super great. And I'm gonna be honest, I decided not to include it. It just wasn't worth it just for that first episode when I had others I would rather have overall. I went with the Daleks for the first one. Because it's still early days. The Doctor is still getting used to his companions. And, of course, it's the introduction to the Daleks. And it's 7 parts, so it's got some length to it. Perhaps too much length to it. But to me, it just seemed like a good jumping on point if you didn't have an unearthly child. The Daleks seems like a good jumping on point, and it introduces them to the people to the Daleks early. The next one on the list I picked is the Reign of Terror. I really enjoy the Reign of Terror. It's probably my favorite pure historical. I really love that cliffhanger with the house on fire at the end of episode 1. I enjoy Hartnell in it. I like the fact his mouth gets him in trouble with the guy who's working the prisoner line. Him getting snippy with him is what got him in trouble. And he gets to hit him on the head with a shovel later. I just like the fact that aside from aside from Susan being incredibly annoying as Susan tends to be, the other characters are great. Ian gets a lot to do. Barbara gets a lot to do. They both get to be pretty great in it. Some of the guest cast are really good in it. I really enjoy rewatching The Reign of Terror when I can. And for number 3, I was tempted to put the Ark, because I do love the Ark a lot. But it didn't feel as necessary to me. And I'm not doing this just subjectively on the ones I like, but I'm trying to be subjective and objective about it. And I went with the War Machines. I didn't want to go with 10th Planet because the animated episode 4 I find a bit disappointing with how they do some of the camera angles. So I went with the War Machines. I think the War Machines is a great story. It's complete. The introduction of Ben and Polly. Hartnell's great in it. It's got a really good story. So it seemed like a good one to round out the first Doctor with, in my opinion. Moving into the second Doctor. And again, we run into this problem of so much of his era either being missing or having to be complete with animations. Naturally, my first thoughts was, would I pick Power with it being animated, or do I pick something not as good as Power? Because Power is probably my favorite Troughton story. But do I pick something that has surviving footage? I went back and forth on this for a while. Ultimately, I did not end up picking Power because of the animation, which the animation's fine. But I wanted to go with stuff that was existing, and I ended up going with the War Games. You get 10 episodes. I like the War Games. I think the War Games is a really good story. Episode 10 is one of the most iconic episodes in the show's history. It really is a nice job by all of the main cast. The guest cast are pretty good in it too. It's the best I've ever seen the Time Lords. They're just amazing in this story. So I really love the War Games. I think you have to keep it. Next, I went with Tomb of the Cybermen. While I find Tomb overrated, I do think it is iconic. It has some nice iconic imagery, like the Cybermen waking up from their tomb is really well done. I like some of the guest cast in it. It has some nice moments in it. And, of course, Troughton and Victoria have that lovely conversation they have in it. So I did think Tomb should be included, and it is complete as well. So I do think it needs to be on there. And then the other one I went with is The Invasion, because The Invasion, I think, is one of the best Cyberman stories ever made, and it's mostly intact. And the animation for the 2 episodes that are animated is good. And it's also got a lot of iconic imagery with the Cybermen walking around the city and coming out of the sewers. And again, Troughton is so good in it. Tobias Vaughn is one of the best human villains I think Doctor Who's ever had. And the actor who plays him, Kent, I think his name was Kent. He's so good in the role. He just oozes every ounce of what he's trying to portray in that character. He's so good at it. And it's got the Brigadier in it. I like the Brigadier. His first story where he's actually the Brigadier in it, which I really like. He's been promoted up from Colonel. And it's got Benton in it. I like Benton. So I love the Invasion. And then moving into the Third Doctor, the final one we will talk about today. I really like the Third Doctor a lot, and his era is amazing. So it's really hard to narrow it down to 3 stories because the Pertwee era is so fantastic. But number 1 on my list I knew immediately was Inferno. I've talked about Inferno before, so I won't go into details on it much here. It is my favorite Pertwee story. It's one of my top 10 favorite Doctor Who stories. And even at 7 parts, it never drags. I feel like it fills out its 7 parts wonderfully. I don't know if there's another Doctor Who story that has so many different plot elements going on and it juggles all of them as perfectly as it's done here. There's so many different things going on, and everything that's going on, it just juggles perfectly. I don't know if there's a Doctor Who story that does that this well. Everything feels balanced, nothing feels out of place, and it all comes together really well. I love Inferno. Next on the list is the 3 Doctors. 1 is my favorite multi-Doctor story. 2 is a chance for us to get more of Troughton and more of Hartnell saved, too. If we're only able to save 3 from each Doctor, this gives us a chance to get Pertwee, Troughton, and Hartnell. Plus, we get a lot of fun stuff like the Brigadier and Benton and the TARDIS watching the Doctors interact with each other. Plus, it's a pretty neat story. I really love the 3 Doctors. Troughton steals the show, as he always does. So it's got to be on there. The last one was a little tricky because I was going to say Mind of Evil, but the quality of the footage of Mind of Evil is a little iffy, especially the colorization. I'm not complaining. It's a miracle we have it in color at all, and I love watching the color version of it. But the color version of it is a little rough. With that in mind, after I thought about it a little bit, I did decide to go with Spearhead instead. 1, Spearhead's a great story. 2, since we're keeping War Games anyway, it's nice to go straight from War Games into Spearhead. Plus, with Spearhead being completely on film, the Blu-ray version of it, I'm sure it looks gorgeous. I've never actually got to watch the Blu-ray version. I have the special edition of the DVD, so I've never got to see the Blu-ray version, but I'm betting it's gorgeous since it is in true HD, the only classic Doctor Who story in true HD. And plus, it's just a really, really good story. I like Spearhead from Space. It does a great job of introducing us to the 70s, to the Third Doctor, and to Doctor Who in color. And it's just a good story in its own right. So those are the 3 I would say from the first 3 Doctors. I would like to know what you would think and which ones you would save from these Doctors. Other things to do, click the like button, click the subscribe button, click the bell for notifications so you never miss out on another video. I also have a Patreon if you like what I do and would like to contribute to what I do. There is a link to that down in the description below, where you get access to extra videos, early access to videos, exclusive interviews, or exclusive videos I should say, and polls to vote in stuff that will come on the channel and on the Patreon. I want to give a special shout out to 2 of my top tier patrons, the 5th Doctor and Stephen Crane. I really appreciate their support, just as I appreciate all of my patron support and all of my subscribers' support. I do have a P.O. box if anybody would like to send me anything, because I did get a few questions about that, so I do have one. My P.O. box is down in the description as well if there's anything you'd like to send me, Doctor Who related or not. And I have a link to my Amazon wish list down there as well if anybody wants to check that out. Or not. The most important thing, though, is I appreciate you taking the time to watch. Thank you.